Hey everyone, I'm Nick Metz with Code-4 Counseling. I really would like to thank Genevieve Fraser from Denver Springs for being here with us today. We thought it would be really helpful, particularly as future peer support members, for you to have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about Denver Springs. Now, we typically will talk about it and kind of give you a brief overview of the kind of resources they have, but frankly, that just doesn't do justice to what this great organization does. And so we thought it would be really good to have someone from Denver Springs to talk a little bit about the facility, the services they provide, their philosophy and those kinds of things, and hopefully answer a lot of questions you may have. And also for you to know a good resource that you can use in the event you run into a situation down the road where you think having Denver Springs for some type of services or again for advice or resources could be really helpful. So Genevieve, thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time to allow us to come into your facility and taking the time to just tell us a little bit about Denver Springs. So just a little bit about you. I know before we went on camera, you said that you've just only been here 18 months. And what is it you do here, and what did you do in your prior life?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for the opportunity. You know, Denver Springs, we really want to be a resource and a partner for the community, especially the first responder community. So we welcome the opportunity to be able to talk about not only all of our services here, but specifically our Help for Heroes program. So a little bit about me. My name is Genevieve Fraser, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm born and raised in Colorado. Denver has been my home. Born and raised in Littleton, so been here my entire life. Deeply invested in behavioral health care within our community. You know, on a bit of a personal note, I was there when Columbine happened. So, you know, being in that kind of immediate trauma response and being supportive of the community and recognizing how those traumatic events can really impact people long term, you know, behavioral health as well as substance use. And so that was the catalyst, so to speak, for me to really look at the way that behavioral health was provided in Colorado. And so I did get my master's degree in social work from DU and specialized in organizational leadership and community development, really wanting to be able to make a change on a macro level, you know, looking at the systems and where are people falling through the cracks and where are the services really needed. And so that is where my passion lies, is being able to assess the needs of the community and then be with an organization that meets those needs. So I've predominantly done acute care behavioral health, so worked with multiple hospital systems doing psychiatric evaluations in emergency rooms, third-party contracting evaluations for the state. So I've very much lived in the what you'd call acute care behavioral health, you know, folks who are in crisis, and where can we get them to they can access treatment and be able to do that real time, because we all know that that needs to happen in the moment. When that moment passes, sometimes it's too late.
Right. Yeah. So you said you were at Columbine when that happened. So I'm guessing with what just happened in Boulder a couple weeks ago, probably brought a lot of things back for you. It did.
You know, and being born and raised in Colorado, I just. It continues to happen in our community, and it's devastating, and it does bring that up, you know, and those type of trauma experiences, even though I was in middle school when that happened, you know, seeing what happened in Boulder and the loss and the devastation into the community, it does re-bring those things up. And so how can we help our community and recognize that within each other, that there is help out there, and when can we access that help?
So when we're talking about Boulder and other major incidents that have occurred not only around Colorado but around the country, and obviously requiring the involvement of, you know, police and fire and EMS, how do you see that impacting what is going on here at Denver Springs? Seeing people coming in with, you know, post-traumatic stress injuries and things like that.
Yeah, it impacts all aspects of our community. It's not just the folks who maybe had a connection to Boulder or maybe had a connection to, you know, something that happened out of state. When we see trauma happen, our brains go back to the trauma that we've experienced,
Right.
right? And we relate that way. Humans are relational. And so that impacts deeply the community and especially first responders, because you as your occupation are constantly in situations that can evoke that trauma response, right? And our brains are very pattern-based. So when we respond to trauma in one way, we'll continue to respond similarly until we break that pattern. And that's what really behavioral health and intensive trauma treatment can do. And that is what we specialize here at Denver Springs through our Help for Heroes program, is doing that intensive trauma work, assessing from the second that folks get here with us all the way through their episode of treatment with us, assessing what is that occupational trauma, what might be trauma that they brought from previous first responder work. And so it's a very in-depth treatment process.
So obviously Denver Springs has a very, if you will, has a heart for responders and has a heart for military. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how that's translated here in the services that you provide?
Absolutely, yeah. Our Help for Heroes program is a specialized program that we developed for active duty military, first responders, veterans, and frontline healthcare workers. And that was developed with the Department of Defense, so we follow their guidelines. We work with military installations throughout the country and have active duty folks coming to us specifically for our Heroes program. And that entails 3 different types of treatment tracks. And they are mental wellness, so general depression, anxiety, maybe OCD, just kind of those general behavioral health conditions. Then we have a specific trauma track as well, and that can be PTSD related to combat, that can be PTSD related to previous experience before occupation exposure, and that can also be related to occupational exposure, PTSD.
Great. So we were talking a little earlier, and you said that the number of folks that are on average that are served here at the facility at one time is around 90 plus folks. What does that look like for the Heroes unit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are up to 96 licensed inpatient behavioral health beds, and we are located in Englewood, Colorado. So we're kind of that southwest or southeast Denver
Right next to
metro
American
area.
Furniture.
Right next to American Furniture, right off the highway. Can't miss us.
Right.
And so within our inpatient facility, we do work with kiddos 12 to 17.
Okay.
We work with general civilian populations, folks experiencing suicidality, depression, anxiety, OCD. We also work with individuals who have maybe experiencing more severe behavioral health conditions like schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, decompensated bipolar disorder, and we have a medical detox. So we have a lot of different units within our hospital, but then we also have our Help for Heroes program within the hospital as well. And so each unit is separated from the others. Our Heroes unit is located with, it's a little bit hard to explain.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
So our Heroes unit is a designated unit, but it does share a nurse's station with our low acute adult unit. And so all of our Heroes program is completely insulated. So if folks are coming in and they are wanting to work on occupational trauma, mental wellness, depression, anxiety, or they also have some co-occurring substance use, our programming on our Heroes unit, specifically with our Heroes therapists, there are times where that unit is full when it comes to bed capacity, but we are able to have folks stay on our low acute unit and then come over and program. So we do everything that we possibly can. That's one of our highest priorities, is to make sure that the person's privacy is respected. We triage very quickly from the second that the responder comes to us. We're very quick to get them through the assessment process and get them back to the unit, and so they can have that orientation piece. And so we do everything that we possibly can to make sure that that person's identity is protected, because we do understand it can be difficult to make that decision to get help, and you don't want to be around folks that maybe you have encountered in your
Right.
work. And so that is something that we do offer, is that programming specific to heroes that is not open to general civilian population.
Okay. When someone comes to Denver Springs, and let's go specific with the Heroes Unit, what is the typical length of stay?
Yeah. So typical length of stay for our heroes population, non-active duty, because that's a completely separate group.
Okay, okay.
Those are typically designated by the installations themselves. But I would say the average length of stay is about 7 to 10 days, just depending. And within that time, we put a lot of work in those 7 to 10 days to make sure that the person is not only having that thorough assessment, interventions, we're also doing some heavy processing for trauma as well throughout that time, which is unique to Denver Springs. Typically, when you think about an inpatient behavioral health facility, it is all group-based therapies, and you have a discharge planner who's working to secure a safety plan and working with family to make sure that the person is safe to discharge to a lower level of care. On our Heroes Unit, we really are addressing that trauma, not only on a group basis, but also individual.
So when a person goes through Denver Springs, and then when they've gone through that 10 days and they're discharged, is that typically the end of their relationship with Denver Springs?
Absolutely not. We've really grown over the past year and a half. We've been lucky to be able to expand to our Help for Heroes outpatient, and that does include partial hospitalization. It is 5 days a week, about 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday. That program is about 2 weeks long, so 10 days. There's also a medication management, so you're still seeing a doctor during that time period in case there's any changes that need to be made. And then we also have our intensive outpatient program. That is 5 days a week for 3 hours a day. And then we stepped out that down to 3 days a week for 3 hours a day. So inpatient is not the end for folks coming to Denver Springs. And sometimes it's also not the beginning. We are very fluid in our levels of care. So somebody may not need inpatient. There's that recognition that there is something wrong, right? I'm not being able, when I go to work, I'm not able to focus. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating. My family, my peers, my coworkers are saying there's something wrong. I can recognize that, they're recognizing that, or maybe I'm not recognizing it, but somebody's telling me there's something wrong, right? And so we are here for that preventive piece as well. It does not need to be inpatient partial hospitalization IOP. Somebody can start in partial, somebody can start in IOP. It is very fluid, moving back and forth.
And IOP again is?
Intensive outpatient.
Got it, okay. So obviously you're describing a whole myriad of different kinds of options that, whether if someone may be reticent about doing inpatient right away, or maybe just for whatever reason they can't, but there's other options for them. It's not just a, sorry, we can't help you kind of thing.
Absolutely, no, and we recognize that it can be very difficult to seek help and to take that first step to say, I do need help. There is something that's going on, and we really try to be that partner and that resource that can be accessed 24/7. Because we know when folks make that decision to seek care, it needs to happen right then and there. It really needs to be that quick access so that we can capture that moment and really get on that journey to wellness.
So you mentioned a little earlier that you have the detox unit, if you will, for lack of a better term. And I know that I've facilitated folks to come to Denver Springs in the past who have needed detox. And again, the audience here are peer support members who may run into folks within their work or anything or something like that, where that person is really dealing with some severe substance issues, and detox is necessary. How does that work?
So folks can access us 24/7. They are able to call us anytime at 720-643-4300 and do a phone assessment. So they don't even necessarily need to walk in. If you're concerned that, especially if somebody's intoxicated, right? Like, we don't want them driving to us. But what we can offer is that phone assessment piece where we are able to do those initial assessments, really look at what level of care might be good for them. And if they do need that inpatient medical detox. Because as we know, there are complications that can happen with withdrawal.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that we are assessing for that medical pieces also. And once that phone assessment is completed, we typically will schedule for them to come in, and then they actually do their full intake. And all of our intake rooms are private, and through that they'll meet with a nurse, they meet with a master's level clinician. Many of them are fully licensed, but they're all master's level to do that initial assessment piece. Then they're triaged back to the unit where they are again going to meet with a nurse and do that full intake process. Make sure that they're medically stable, that there's not any concerns of severe withdrawal. If somebody does need IV management for withdrawal symptoms, we will triage them to a local hospital because we're not able to do IV management here. But we often see folks coming in, first responders, frontline healthcare workers, veterans who have the medical detox component. And of course, they always have that behavioral health trauma piece too.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that those really go hand in hand. Why is somebody using? What is that? What's behind that use? And so we're addressing all of those pieces.
Over the last year in particular, what's been the impact on the services that you guys provide, you know, given COVID and for that matter, the, you know, post George Floyd incident in Minneapolis? How is that, what have you seen just in the responders that are coming in?
You know, I think it has been just that perfect storm of stress. We have responders coming in that are referencing the pandemic and being exposed, especially during the early days, being exposed and then going home to their families. And what does that look like? That stress of not only having to protect themselves at work, but then also that possible exposure and infection to their families. So there's that complex stress, job loss of spouses, kids being home from school. So all of those things that kind of the general civilian population have been experiencing, but it's even more intense because then they also are at risk every day. And that's very similar to the frontline healthcare workers.
Right, I was just going to say that.
So nurses, respiratory therapists, docs, EMS workers, all of those folks who are really in that medical space, frontline healthcare, are experiencing similar pieces to that. And then you also have the, you know, societal political climate, right? And so there's another layer of stress. And not only is there this element of I'm here to help and serve my community and protect in many different capacities. And there's also some of this political and social climate of the community maybe not feeling that support and feeling somewhat ostracized from the community. And so we have absolutely seen responders and healthcare workers come in with all of those pieces. And it has led to increased substance use, severe anxiety and depression. You know, how do you cope when there's really no place to turn? There's no safety in any sense of the word. There's no psychological safety. There's no physical safety. There's no medical safety. You know, all of those pieces that you could say, well, at least I have X, Y, Z. A lot of that was kind of taken away in many ways with COVID. And so we are definitely seeing folks being impacted.
Right. And you mentioned when you in the early part of your answer there that, you know, the impact that this has had on families. And we all know that, you know, the responder families, the frontline medical worker families have been incredibly impacted given this last year. What kind of resources do you provide to the families of those who are seeking services here? Yeah,
so we are coordinating with spouses and loved ones while the responder is here with us. And we are doing family supportive meetings, so talking about, you know, what is the progression been. Of course, we do get those release of information. We go through all of those HIPAA compliance pieces to respect the privacy as well. And so we are doing Unfortunately, right now, we're not having in-person visitors because of COVID. We are hoping that that will change with more vaccinations and things opening up more. We're anticipating it will continue to be on a limited basis. And so right now, all of those family meetings are either done virtually or via phone, but they're very supportive. What is the progression in treatment? What does the family dynamics and unit look like for everybody to begin to heal and have that journey to wellness? And then we are providing supports and recommendations for aftercare for family therapy for providers who are culturally competent to work with the responder population.
That is so important.
Yes.
That's absolutely so important. So for our future peer support members who are watching this, and if they are working with somebody who they believe is in need of the type of services that you provide here, I guess one would be, how do they make that happen?
Yeah.
And the second part of that would be, what are the procedures that, like in that first 24 hours that someone checking in could expect? That, and I'm asking this so that the responders can, if they're talking to someone, they can say, hey, this is how Denver Spring works. And
absolutely. It's such an important piece, right? It's hard, it's difficult to say, I need help and I want help, and then to actually go and get that help is a whole other level of difficult. And so we do very much want to be transparent with, the way that our processes work. And so we are open 24/7. We're available for phone or walk-in. If somebody is coming in with family members, the family members are able to come in into the lobby and speak with the evaluator. Once again, it's always going to be that master's level clinician doing that initial assessment. What we're looking at is history, trauma history, substance use history, family dynamics. We're looking at risk factors during that time. Is this person at risk for suicide? What does that look like? Is this person at risk for withdrawal processes? What does that look like? So we do ask a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we have all the information so that we can best create that treatment plan in tandem with that responder for success. If we're missing a lot of information, then the success rates aren't great, right? Like there's that element of transparency that does need to happen. And we find that, especially with our hero population, once folks get into the group processes and they get into that tight cohort, a lot of things start coming out. There is that level of camaraderie between our active duty, first responders, healthcare workers, veterans. There is that commonality of experience being in a high stress occupation. And so that is a really nice way to build that supportive dynamic group that process starts to just kind of flow on its own. So we do have all of our inpatient clinicians do have experience working with frontline healthcare workers or first responders or active duty military. They really specialize in that piece. And many of them also have advanced certificates for trauma work. So EMDR, CPT, schema processing therapy, all of those pieces on how, like I mentioned earlier, how do we retrain the brain to react to trauma and to reprocess that so it is not devastating every time we think about it. Or every time that there is something that happens on the news, we don't go back to that space where we feel re-traumatized. We are able to process that in a different way. And that is really our goal, is to get folks to a place where not only are they safe, they're safe for themselves, they're safe for their family, they're safe for the community, but they're also safe to go back to work and do the work that they love.
Absolutely.
That's the goal, is that successful return to work and that successful being able to go back and do the job that you're committed to doing and that you're passionate about. And that is really our goal for our Heroes program. And so there is also prescribers, doctors that will meet with the patients within 24 hours. So it really depends on what time somebody comes in, right? If you're here in the morning, that might happen that day. If you come in at 10 o'clock at night, that's definitely not happening until the next morning. But we have 24/7 nursing, so they're up all night. There's always somebody there to talk to. And then we also have that individual therapy piece too, and meeting with families. And so from the moment that somebody comes and admits to our program, we're talking about, what does the future look like? What does discharge look like? We know it's not today, we know it's not tomorrow, but it's going to happen.
Right.
And so how can we best prepare everybody involved to be a support system for that success of that hero?
Right. If somebody is working with a therapist outside of Denver Springs, do you work in partnership with those folks?
Yes, and great. If somebody already has an outpatient therapist, that's wonderful because they have already started to access that help. And so we will get the release of information and we will work in tandem with that therapist on that outpatient piece. Typically, we definitely want them to be able to check in with that therapist throughout their process here, and then as they step down through our levels of care, resume regular individual therapy. That is the best thing that we can ask for.
Absolutely.
Is that we have that titration of care. Going from inpatient to nothing, that's really tough, right? Like, that's not something that creates that community of support. That's really going from your highest level of care to your nothing.
Right.
And so in order to create that success, that safety net, that community for that responder, we do want to get those things built in as they are stepping down through our care.
Right. So I noticed when I came in today, I walked in the front door in the lobby, very, very nice, and knowing responders, we like shiny things and bells and whistles. So what kind of amenities do you have here to kind of make the stay here a little bit more comfortable and productive for them?
I will absolutely preface that our Heroes unit is different than the other units in our hospital because there are amenities that we do offer to that population and that program that we don't for others. So we do have a gym on site that is accessible by all units at different times of the day, so you're not,
you're not crossing
paths or anything like that. And so that is accessible actually a couple of times a day for our heroes, early in the morning for the early morning folks, and then later in the evening for the later folks. They also have tech time, so you are able to access your cell phone, which is not typical for an inpatient behavioral health facility. So that is designated time that you are able to have your personal device and access those, make any calls, anything that you need to do, social media, catch up. So we do offer that is not a regular offering on our other units. Of course, that is if somebody is safe to have those things, right? If we do have those true safety concerns, that would be a different conversation. We also have on-site cafeteria with multiple different dietary options as well. And then we do have, it's just a very active unit. You'll go back there and they're playing games, they're playing basketball, it's just, the responder population is active folks, military active folks. So we want to make sure that the day is filled and it's filled productively. So every day there is a printed schedule that breaks down each group, if it's individual, if it's a group process, what is entailed in those pieces, so folks are prepared for their day, and then when is downtime and what does that look like. So folks are not wondering what's going to happen every day. It's printed, they can make notes, they can carry it around.
Pretty structured, obviously.
Very structured.
Right.
And that's we do have that structure on all units, but there are additional offerings for the heroes.
Well, I got to tell you, this interview went far better than I imagined on my part. No, this was phenomenal, and I just really appreciate not only the description but the genuineness and sincerity that you guys put into the work that you do, and especially for responders and military, because it is a very special culture. Before we end, is there anything you'd like to say to our future peer support members? As far as what they're getting themselves into and what Denver Springs can provide for them.
Absolutely, yeah. I would first like to say thank you. This is something that you do in addition to everything else that is on your plate, and it truly is impactful. There are folks that you may have a 30-minute conversation with 6 months ago, and you may not remember it, but it's something that changed their lives. And so those moments do happen, and many times we're not even aware of them. And so that work that you do as a peer support is invaluable. And you are not only a resource, but you're not alone as being a resource. Denver Springs is always here as a resource, as a partner. You can call us anytime, even if you're not sure, even if there's a question, does this person need help? What does that look like? We are here to talk through that with you. So you can call us and say, you don't have to mention a name. You don't have to mention any of those pieces, but this is a similar situation, and what do you think? And we're always here as that resource for you, and we're a partner. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about our Help for Heroes program in Denver Springs.
Well, it's been an absolute honor, and again, I just really appreciate you opening your doors to us. So thank you again, Genevieve Fraser from Denver Springs, and again, we hope our paths cross with you guys again.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.